Today, we'll dive into a fascinating tale that carries timeless lessons. As we journey through this story, let's also explore the rich language they offer to sharpen your English skills.
The Wise and the Foolish Merchant. Once upon a time, in a land filled with bustling markets and grand cities, there were two merchants. One was wise and careful with his money. The other was young and foolish, always making decisions without thinking ahead. Both merchants traveled to the same big city to buy goods, silks, spices, and treasures, planning to sell them as they journeyed through the country. When they finished their shopping, they realized something. They were both leaving the city at the same time. The wise merchant thought, "If we travel together, it will be difficult to find enough water, firewood, and grass for the oxen. One of us should go first." So he approached the young merchant and asked, "Would you like to go ahead, or shall I?" The foolish merchant thought to himself, "If I go first, the grass will be fresh, the water will be clean, and I can set the prices however I want." So, with a confident smile, he said, "Friend, I will go first."
Let's pause for a moment. The phrase, set the prices however I want, means that the foolish merchant believed he could control how much people would pay for his goods. Also, notice how we say, would you like to go ahead or shall I? The phrase, shall I, is a polite way to suggest something. It's less common in modern English, but still used in formal situations. Now, back to the story.
The foolish merchant packed his goods, loaded his wagons, and set off into the vast countryside. His journey was smooth until he reached the desert. Since there was no water in the desert, he filled large clay jars with water and placed them in his wagons. Now, deep in that desert, hidden among the sands, there lived a wicked demon. This demon saw the foolish merchant and thought, "If I can trick him into throwing away his water, I can easily defeat him." So, the demon used his magic to disguise himself as a noble gentleman. He summoned a beautiful carriage pulled by white oxen and gathered 10 other demons, dressing them like wealthy traders with fine clothes. To make the disguise perfect, he covered the oxen's feet in mud, sprinkled water lilies on the cart, and made his clothes look wet, as if he had just traveled through a lush, rainy forest.
Let's stop here and take a look at some vocabulary. Merchant, a person who buys and sells goods. Goods, things to sell or buy. Desert, a dry, sandy place with little water. Jar, a large container used to hold water or other items. Wagon, a heavy four-wheeled vehicle pulled by animals like oxen or horses. Oxen, castrated adult male cattle that have been trained to work. Disguise, a costume or trick to hide someone's true identity.
When the demon and his men met the foolish merchant, they greeted him kindly. "Where are you traveling, friend?" The merchant replied, "I have come from the city, and I am crossing the desert to reach the villages beyond. But tell me, why are your clothes wet? Did you pass through a stream?" The demon smiled and pointed ahead. "Yes, just beyond that ridge, there is a great forest with lakes full of water lilies. It rains often there. You won't need all that heavy water anymore." Hearing this, the foolish merchant thought, "Why carry heavy jars if there's plenty of water ahead?" So he poured out all his water onto the hot desert sand. That night, as the caravan moved forward, they found no lakes, no streams, only endless, dry land. With no water left, the men grew weak. The oxen collapsed from thirst. And then, in the dead of night, the demons returned. They took everything: the merchants, the animals, the goods. Only the empty wagons remained. A month later, the wise merchant began his journey. He, too, reached the desert. And, just like before, the demon appeared in his noble disguise, telling him of the lakes ahead. But the wise merchant was observant. He noticed something strange. The so-called nobleman had no shadow. "This must be a demon," he thought. When the demon advised him to throw away his water, he firmly replied, "We do not throw away water until we see another source." As night fell, his men became suspicious. "Sir, those men looked rich. Their clothes were wet. Maybe they were telling the truth." The wise merchant asked, "Have you ever heard of a lake in this desert?" His men shook their heads. "Do you feel a wet breeze?" Again, they said no. "Do you see a rain cloud?" Still, the answer was no. "Those were demons," the wise merchant declared. "They wanted to trick us into weakness. We must be careful." That night, they traveled onward. Soon, they found the abandoned wagons of the foolish merchant. The wise merchant gathered the best of the supplies and continued safely across the desert, reaching the city beyond. There, he sold his goods at a great profit and returned home as a wealthy man. And so, the wise merchant prospered, while the foolish one vanished, never to be seen again. The end.
Grammar tip. The phrase, "we do not throw away water until we see another source," is an example of the present simple used for general truths or rules. The wise merchant states a fact about his principles. The phrase, "they wanted to trick us into weakness, we must be careful," is an example of parallel structure. Both parts of the sentence follow a similar structure, each containing a subject and a verb. "They wanted to trick us into weakness" is a complete thought that means attempting to manipulate the merchants in a way to make them less strong. And "we must be careful" is another complete thought that gains emphasis by standing alone. It highlights the urgency and importance of the statement. Curiosity. Did you know that in some cultures, merchants had to carry their own water for months because oases were rare? This story reflects real challenges traders faced in ancient times. What a difference wisdom makes. The wise merchant asked questions, observed his surroundings, and made careful decisions. Because of this, he avoided disaster. This story teaches us the importance of critical thinking, not believing everything we hear and making smart choices. So, what can we learn from this story? Be careful who you trust. Think before you act. Preparation and wisdom lead to success. Learn, grow, and become story-wise today. Thanks for watching our video.